Fitch.
Here.
Bill Brimmer.
Here.
Ken Strike.
Here.
Bridget Brown.
Here.
Grant Foster.
Present.
Mike Tierney is excused. And Harold Cleames.
Here.
That's everyone.
Thank you very much. First off, I'm just going to warn everybody that every Zoom call I've been on over the course of the past 10 days, at some point during the meeting, my video froze up. And my internet went unstable. So Joe's going to help me watch for that and maybe turn off my video. So hopefully that'll help me still be able to be heard. But otherwise, Ken will just, flip it over to you and I'll sign back on again if that's okay. And I sent you my notes, so you should know everything that I know about what's going on tonight. So did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from last time?
Move approval.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Okay, I don't see any hands. We'll assume a unanimous consent vote in favor of approving the minutes from last time. If anybody is in opposition, please raise your hand. Okay, we'll record the unanimous consent vote. Next, Patrick, do we have any members of the public registered for topics not on the agenda?
No.
Okay. How about any disclosures and recusals this evening? I do not see anybody raising their hand. Okay. For the consent agenda, this evening we had items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 proposed for the consent agenda. Patrick, do we have anybody registered to speak on any of those items?
No.
We do not. Okay. Are there any items which members would like to have separated out from the consent agenda?
Can you repeat which ones are proposed for the consent?
Sure. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The first one's on the agenda. So it's 62477, 62612, Legislature 62574, 62611, and 62766. Okay, I don't see any hands. I'm sure I'm at the top of the queue here where I can see hands. Don't see any hands. Okay. All right.
Ken's got his hand up.
Oh, Ken does. Okay, Ken, go ahead.
Just to make it official, move consent on items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, I was just going to ask if anybody was interested in making a motion. Thank you, Ken. Anybody willing to second? Harold has raised his hand. I assume that's a second. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Consent agenda items again, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Legistar 62477, 62612, 62574, 62611, and 62766. Any discussion? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote on the consent agenda. If anybody wishes to vote in opposition, please, or wish a roll call vote, please raise your hand. Okay. I don't see any hands raised. So we will move on to item number 7, which is update on shared street. Patrick, do we have anybody registered to speak? We have, let me just say, we have well over, I think I've seen 50 emails with the ones that you just sent out. We have well over 40 emails requesting that Vilas Park Drive remain closed. There were a few in favor of reopening. There were a couple that were in the middle. Is there anybody who's registered to speak this evening?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what our normal process would be is to go ahead and have staff make a presentation, and then we'll hear from the public, and we also have some alders who are present who may like to speak, and then we'll discuss. So staff, Renee, are you going to handle this?
Yeah, I am. Thanks, Anne.
Okay.
I'm just gonna share this quickly. All right. So most of you have seen this before, but this is kind of the projects that we did roll out and kind of what we're calling our shared streets or social distancing streets. We had several streets, East Mifflin, Sherman, South and West Shore, that we restricted to local traffic only with just some barricades. Then on Atwood Avenue, we repurposed a travel lane to create a two-way space for people biking, so they no longer needed to ride on the sidewalk. We did have a couple of streets, Clyde Gallagher and Trails Way Monterey Drive, where we had restricted them to local only traffic only, but through discussions with the neighborhood, we did remove those because they did not feel that they met the needs of that particular neighborhood. And then we had Vilas Park Drive, the one street that was open only for walking and biking, since there were no residences along that street, that Park Street. So we did launch these in April, back when we actually had that safer at home order, which seems like it was pretty long ago now. And we were seeing more people walking and biking, a lot of concerns over a space for the 6-foot social distancing. So one thing that we did not do at that time, I certainly did not realize that we would have worse COVID cases now than we were looking at then. So we did really not talk about sort of a long-term plan for these. What would we do? So, that is what we're kind of here to talk about. I think I can say that this was a small program, but it was successful in its own way. Atwood Avenue proved to be quite popular. Definitely a lot of benefit to trialing out the plan that is how that street is already intended for reconstruction down the road. We saw good usage of it. We were able to do some counting in this particular location, and we saw maybe 2,800 users in that lane at sort of the height of the summer. Has dwindled off to less than 1,000 with the colder weather, but definitely was very popular, was well used, even though with the orange barrels, it was not necessarily super obvious that that was a bike lane. And some people did still continue to ride on the sidewalk because obviously after, 20 years, it does take a little while for that habit to change. But this is definitely pretty successful. I think it grew a lot of support for this project. Definitely raised some questions about should that facility continue even further into Monona in the long run. So I think really in looking at something as a test, that was really good. Vilas Park Drive also allowed testing. One of the ideas that came out of the master plan process, which was in the long run to not have through traffic in the park. That was one of the ideas that was put forward and seems to be moving forward through that process with a lot of support. So I think that was also a really great test that we were able to do. I think we also learned that, this idea of having just sort of a quiet, slow street where it should be local traffic only doesn't resonate with everyone. In the two neighborhoods where we, what we call our neighborhood resource team area, they felt like it was a hindrance to them going about their daily lives. that it really wasn't benefiting them. And in some instances, people told me they felt like it was only for people, so it would be easier for them to pass through their neighborhood, not for the people who live there. So we did take those out. We had some talks with the neighborhood about what kinds of things might resonate with them, gave us some ideas for the future. But we were not able to go back and do any of those. And part of that is just we do not have a ton of equipment for these kinds of temporary installations. Definitely this year we saw more demand for that than we had available and had to push some sort of test things off to next year because of that. But we did include some funding in the budget for next year so that we can increase that equipment and have some things that maybe would work a little bit better than an orange barrel, which kind of gives that construction zone feel, or our barricades, which if you have been out to some of our streets are looking pretty rough. Definitely the sandbags have split open in some cases in the wind. We have a few of the barricade parts that probably will not survive this year, just because they've been pushed around a lot in the wind and by people moving them. But definitely a great learning experience, I felt. And definitely, we did see strong support on some of our streets for these kinds of changes. I mean, maybe not with barricades, but with something either of a different substance or maybe a more permanent change because they liked what they experienced. So I think that was really good and mirrored what a lot of people around the country saw with sort of lower income, more racially diverse neighborhoods where people were maybe struggling with how to get internet, how to get to their jobs that were not the kind that you can telecommute, or just worrying about, having housing, that just having a shared street space maybe did not resonate so well, and that they were more interested in traffic calming, speeding, things like that. And that's definitely what I was hearing from residents as well. So, here today, I do want to talk about, I call it winter removal. I don't really want to call it a closure of the program, but maybe a pause of the program where we could evaluate, determine how we would want to move forward as we look to 2021, and sort of channel what we've learned and the enthusiasm that it definitely exists in some neighborhoods into how we can, in the long run, have a more equitable program that might inform our investments, that might fit well with what the traffic calming subcommittee is looking at, something that would make sense. I did include sort of a proposed survey that we would do of residents to kind of get some additional feedback on this. Definitely we could add or change questions on there, but I would like to get some feedback so we can think about this program for the future and how it fits into our other sort of transportation programs, neighborhood traffic programs that we have. So I guess that is what I wanted to share with you.
Okay. A lot of good information for us to think about. I see from what Joe sent out that we have 58 registrants, 5 in support, 53 opposed. And it looks like we have 3 who wish to speak. Is that right, Patrick?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to start us off with those who wish to speak?
Sure.
We can make sure all the rest of them really don't wish to speak. So.
Okay. The first is Jim.
Excuse me a second. Bill, did you have your hand up? Go ahead.
And when you say opposed, could you define what are they opposing and what are they for?
I am assuming, based on the 60 emails I read, that they're mostly talking about the Vilas Park Drive.
Right, but are they?
But what I believe that they mean is they're opposed to reopening this. That it's in support of the program moving forward. In other words, reopening the street. And those who are opposed do not want the street reopened.
Okay, so they're opposed to the pause. They want to continue
Correct.
the way it is. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Is that your assessment as well, Renee?
Correct. That is my assessment, that they're opposed to putting the program on pause and allowing the streets to go back to the way they were previously.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Patrick, unless there's any other questions before we get started.
Okay.
And
first registrant is Jim Lorman, Wingra Street. He opposes and wishes to speak.
Yeah, can you tell me how much time we have?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. So thank you for the opportunity to comment. Yeah, there was some confusion among people. This just found out about this proposal last 2 days, and it was unclear how to register, but I can concur with your conclusion that most people who are opposing the opening, and mostly we're talking about Vilas Park Drive. I'm an avid bicyclist and have used the shared street program, but I'm not speaking to the question of going on pause for the shared street program in general. I can see the reasons for doing that. However, I think the Vilas Park Drive situation is quite different. And as Renee pointed out, it's part of the master planning process that because of the closing, people appreciated the transformation of that space that in a way that they otherwise would not have, and it became a part of then the final draft master plan, which hopefully will be implemented in 2014. I'd like to point out, I know that you got lots of messages, something like 40 or so. One of those is from me. I don't expect that, given the fact that people just heard about this in the last day or two, that you've had a chance to go through them all. Mine is a 2-page with embedded graphics. So if you happen to have that handy and want to take a look at it, obviously I can't go through all that in the time I have. But I do want to just emphasize that as a result of the experience people had over this summer with people say closing down the street traffic, most of us would prefer to talk about opening it up to park uses in ways that otherwise have not been possible. People are very much gotten used to that, and changing it at this point is very different than just pausing a shared street program in other streets, because the intent is to make it permanent. The question is how to take care of that in the time before that reconstruction can happen in a few years from now. And rather than opening the street up again through traffic, and in this case, we're talking about commuter traffic largely. 96% of the traffic, according to a traffic study, is drive-through traffic, staying less than 15 minutes in the park, going over the speed limit very commonly, and it's not a park use. So in addition to all the other questions, separate questions about COVID and so forth, we're talking about a long-term and short-term questions of how a park can be used. I think you can see from the responses you've got that people are feeling pretty strongly about the value of having commuter traffic and through traffic closed down. The question is, what can we do between now and the time of reconstruction happens to maintain that kind of situation? In the document I sent, I gave you some ideas I've been exploring with others, and I don't have time to go into that all right now, but I do just want to emphasize that changing this now would create confusion when it gets changed back. There's thought about if perhaps we can change it in the spring. Out of time.
Yeah.
What I would like to do is say that I'm available. I'll stay on if there's questions I can address later. So thank you very much.
Okay. And I would tell you that I read all of the feedback personally, with the exception of the one that came in after I already started the meeting. So I didn't have a chance to read that one, but I'll read it later. So thank you very much. And because we have so many people, I'll ask, does anybody have any questions for Jim right now before we move to the next one? Okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Catherine Jagoe, West Lawn Avenue, opposes and wishes to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've lived in on West Lawn for 34 years, approximately. I'd like to just briefly reiterate Jim Lorman's points, which I think he made very well. I'm like Jim, I'm also a member of the resident resource group for the Violet Park Master Plan and a very frequent park user. And my family and I are in that park, either walking, running, or jogging pretty much every day. And we've just really noticed what an amazing change has happened thanks to the shutdown of through traffic. And I would encourage you to maintain that, given that the master plan is looking at 2024 as making that permanent, and figure out if there's some way to get people who need to get access to the shelter for ice skating in the winter to do that without reopening to through traffic commuters. And that's basically all I needed to say. Thank you.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Catherine? Okay, thank you, Catherine. Patrick, next.
Shawn Schey, Woodrow Street, opposes and wishes to speak.
Shawn, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So I would just like to support what Catherine Jagoe and Jim Lorman have said already. I live on Woodrow Street, which is just the western side of the Edgewood campus. And Woodrow Street is a cul-de-sac that has a bike path that leads to the Park and Pleasure Drive, which goes behind Edgewood campus along Lake Wingra and then curves into Vilas Park Drive. And I can attest to the number of bikers and walkers and families with strollers, even people in wheelchairs that go past my house daily. There are hundreds of people. And with the pandemic, it's just increased immeasurably. So all these people that are coming down Woodrow and going down the Park and Pleasure Drive and then onto the Vilas Park Drive, intersecting that, often make use of that walkway as well. And it's just been a real boon to the community. And I have to say that the Park and Pleasure Drive was not always closed to cut through traffic, but in the early 2000s, that endeavor was taken on by the community at large. And we did experience what the drive was like with lots of traffic and how it impacted the safety and enjoyment of that portion of the loop. And now that it's been closed now to through traffic since 2006, 2007, and it's just an incredible transformation and quite a resource for all of Madison now. So I am hopeful that the pause that's being talked about of the closure of the Vilas Park Drive not be instituted, that there just be a continuation from now on into the future for having this resource available to the community. I think it's been demonstrated that motorists have found other avenues that they can use to get to Park Street or wherever south they need to get from this portion of town. So I'd like to see that continued without a break. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody have any questions for Shawn? Okay, thanks. Next, Patrick.
All of the rest do not wish to speak. Do you want me to read through them regarding their support or opposition?
I think it's important for people to know the numbers if they didn't see the email that Joe sent. So I think it's important for people to know who's registered and whether they support or oppose, understanding what that means, of course.
Okay. So in opposition, Sally Lehner, Madison Street, David Gevers, Madison Street. Rolf and Judith Mianis, Fox Avenue. Keith Sales, Aaron Street. Milton Johnson, Madison Street. Deborah Spring Laurel, Vilas Avenue. Siri Carpenter, Vilas Avenue. Marilee Shushorova, Adams Street. Sarah Bahoudin, Jefferson Street. Eileen Hornberger Thompson, Campbell Street. Ann Spurgeon, Garfield Street. Creel Ziering, Orchard Street. Fred Tony, Rowley Avenue. Judy and Ben Sidron, Jefferson Street. Amy Goldman, Madison Street. Linda Krubaugh, Aaron Street. Barbara Streibel, Eaton Ridge. Zakai Lewis, Emerald Street. Peter Daly, Lincoln Street. Stacy Teuber, Vilas Avenue. Gail Anderson, Orchard Street. Tamar Kelson, Emerald Street. Dan Elsas, Orchard Street. Bridget Daly, Charter Street. Pamela Gilboa, Terry Place. Richard Scott, Oakland Avenue. Anita Szymanski, Orchard Street. Marguerite Burns, Eaton Ridge. Cynthia Koshman, Emerald Street. Ann Rivlin, Garfield Street. L. Fields, Aaron Street. Catherine Gabert, Monroe Street. Ann Forbes, Wingra Street. Ben Yar, Fitchburg Road in Fitchburg. Let's see. Deborah Cruz Field, Keyes Avenue. Michael Swift, Jefferson Street. Just the last name, Lamb, Jefferson Street. Jennifer Borchert, Brooks Street. Jocelyn Borchert, Brooks Street. Jane and Michael Ferris, Jefferson Street. Zach Smith, Wyoto Avenue. Linda Merrill, Orchard Street. Tevin Tucci, Jefferson Street. Mary Ellen Gabriel, Holly Avenue. Eric Curlow, Adams Street. Marika Engel, Emerald Street. Michael Pilars, Gregory Street. Peggy Rosen, Vilas Avenue. Andrew Shapiro, Vilas Avenue. And Pat Setti, Vilas Avenue. The people that are in support: Kathleen Wall, Lincoln Street. Rachel and Michael Balistreri, Allen Street. Chadwick DeVos, Monroe Street. And Fred, did I say Fred Tony? Rowley Avenue. And that's it.
Okay, a lot of people who are very interested in this topic. I see that Alder Evers and Alder Harrington McKinney have joined us this evening. Alder Evers, I know I communicated with you earlier, and I know you have some comments with regard to this topic, and I'm not sure if Alder Harrington McKinney does as well, but Alder Evers, did you have some comments that you wanted to make at this time?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kovich. I appreciate your time, and I hope not to take up much of it, but I will be available to answer questions. I do have another meeting I have to keep an eye on, but I hope to stick around for the next item on your agenda, the Park Cedar intersection. I have received and been copied on many of the emails that you received, and the overwhelming majority of them are opposed to reopening Vilas Park Drive. There is one resident who would like special accommodations for handicapped residents should the drive remain closed. but I counted only 2 in favor of opening it back up. And as Jim Lorman stated, that prior to the pandemic, nearly all the through traffic was due to commuters cutting through the park. And they were on their way somewhere else, often to a Fish Hatchery Road or to South Park. And I must admit, I used to do that same cut through, particularly when I was in a hurry to get out of town, to get to the Beltline, to get on the interstate. And I found that as a convenient cut through. The trouble is that people who are cutting through the park and not looking to use the park often do so at high rates of speed and with disregard for the people who are there to enjoy the park, the pedestrians and bicyclists. So the closure of the drive as a part of the shared street has actually activated this street in a rather remarkable manner, and it's given primacy to those who were there to appreciate the natural beauty of the Wingra shoreline. These are actual park users. These are not commuters. I believe the closure of Vilas Park Drive, I think the evidence is this was different in concept from the shared streets, and that this is the only one that actually resulted in a complete closure of the street as far as I can tell. And the reason for this is that while the other streets were trying to reduce traffic to local residents only, there are no local residents here who were cutting through. These were all, in a sense, foreign users, foreign to the actual park itself, who were trying to cut through. There are ways to accommodate park users in an equitable manner that do not require opening up the drive to commuters. And I suggest that we work on those. Jim Lorman has had several good ideas, and I've in fact been in discussions with Yang Tao and Eric Knapp. Yang Tao, the traffic engineer, and Eric Knapp, the park superintendent. I think it's premature to move forward short of trying to work this out. And I will want to remind you, and I think this is a shared value that we have in the city among those of us who are trying to come up with good policy. Whenever there is a conflict between staff and stakeholders, it's incumbent upon us to slow down the process, to make 100% sure that we are engaging residents, to make sure that we are not using top-down decision-making processes that would exclude the voices who are most impacted. And for that reason, I ask you as a body to urge the Yang Tao, our traffic engineer, and Eric Knapp, the park superintendent, to refer this to the Board of Parks Commissioners, and that we should view this as a separate matter from the Shared Streets program and consider this as part and parcel of the ongoing Vilas Park Master Plan planning process. I'm available to answer questions and appreciate your due consideration of this item. Thank you.
Okay, before we go to discussion, Bridget, did you have a question for Alder Evers? Otherwise, I was going to ask Alder Harrington McKinney if she wanted to speak.
No, I can hold my question.
Okay. Alder Harrington McKinney, did you have comments on this particular topic?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. I do not have comment on this particular item.
Okay, thank you. Bridget, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know from the Alder, would it preclude being able to address access in the overall park planning process if there were still approval to continue the current status? So if we were to approve this today, would that somehow preclude the discussion taking place in planning as you've suggested?
Okay, Alder Evers, you're muted.
You know, I've been doing these Zoom meetings for how long now, like we all have, and that still happens to me. I mute myself and forget to unmute myself.
It happens to us all.
Yeah, technically speaking, no, it does not preclude the continued planning. As you probably are aware, that the Vilas Park Master Plan itself is recommending that this road remain closed. But there's an argument to be made that there is a positive habit that has been formed on the part of folks who have now found other ways to commute without having impinging upon park users. And it is confusing, I think, to move back and forth when you talk about trying to build habits that are consistent with the common good. It's not a negligible impact to suddenly work against that. And the experience has been overwhelmingly positive. I do believe that we can tweak this and adjust this, and there are considerations. One of them is that we could move the barriers to both sides of the parking lot entrance to the shelter, and then allows two-way traffic under reduced traffic considerations, allowing folks to, if necessary, who go to the park shelter to exit back out the opposite way. But that will significantly reduce the amount of overall traffic. 96% by the surveys that were taken pre-pandemic of vehicular traffic along this road was due to commuters. And if we can prevent that from coming back, we can effectively transition in a positive way that places emphasis upon park users, not upon vehicular shortcuts. As one who used to take that vehicular shortcut, I am now in the habit of not doing so. And I think that that is a positive that Transportation Commission would want to reinforce, that positive habit, knowing how difficult and how challenging it is to get those habits inculcated in the first place. So well, technically the answer to your question is no, it does not interfere with the ongoing Vilas Park Master Plan process, but it in effect works counter to one of the primary and foremost recommendations of the master plan, which is in draft stage, but in a final draft stage, clearly recommending that we change Vilas Park Drive from a through access to no vehicular through access. I hope that answers your question.
Is that what all you had, Bridget?
Yeah, I guess, can I do a quick follow-up question?
Sure. And then it looks like Tom Lynch might want to weigh in on that as well.
Okay, yeah, and I was going to ask if we could see if what staff's comments are on this. So maybe that's what Tom's going to cover.
Okay, Tom, and then Renee, if you have any comments as well. Tom, go ahead.
Okay, yes. So I'm joining the meeting late and the conversation late, and so I apologize, and I don't want to be presumptuous. I was riding from MMB to my house. I have had some conversations with Eric just today, and he has a variety of concerns that perhaps Renee can elaborate. I think I'll just make, I think the two key points regarding this would be, most of the shared streets program happen on city road right of way and street right of way. The Vilas Park is kind of an interesting thing in that it's actually all on park right of way, like it's all park. And so the Parks Commission has some jurisdiction over this, just like, Bill, Section 4F, 106F. And so I think there's some shared jurisdiction over this. It's not just, I think, fully within the purview of the Transportation Commission. I think the other thing he mentioned is that, long term, I think something could be worked out, but for this winter season, parks would not have the resources to come up with an alternate solution on their own or be able to clear a shared use path. That's just stating what Eric said within his division. So I apologize for entering the discussion late. I think I just wanted to make the statement of fact that there's kind of a dual jurisdiction over this road, and Parks right now doesn't have the resources to come up with an alternate solution. So, Renee, you might have a fuller understanding.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Obviously this is a park road, so we have been working with the Parks Department on this, talking through some various ideas for what you could do in the interim until, if the master plan is approved as as it is now recommended, when, that would go into effect. So talking through things, but obviously none of these are without a cost. So, the question is this where we want to put that expense? I mean, it's the parks budget that this would impact. So, obviously they have some concerns there, and this wasn't something that they had budgeted for. Say if we created some space that would be for walking and biking that needed plowed, or if we wanted this to become a two-way street from a one-way street, the expense of changing all of the signage, the paint markings, and is that the solution that would work best in this situation to, would need to be fully considered. So I think, there's a lot at play here, but definitely strong interest in coming up with something so that it's not just left as is until the capital improvement would happen as is in the master plan.
Bridget, did that address all of your questions?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Harold, go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, maybe this is a bit of a follow-up to this on a procedural level. I mean, on the agenda, this is billed as an update to the Shared Streets program. And as we have heard, this has led to some confusion where people registering, well, are you opposed to the update? No. I mean, as we have determined, people are opposed to specific sub-item of something that is like, oh yeah, we're just going to do this without making a decision. So I guess I would like to, and now we have heard from Tom Lynch that this is a parks road and therefore it is more complicated anyway. So I guess we need to have a clear understanding of what our responsibility here is as a commission and what decisions we should be making and can be making. I mean, based on all the feedback that we've heard so far, I think there's pretty strong sentiment that people do not want the drive to be opened, but we have to figure out what that means for us as a commission. And then I think separating this from all the other questions that Renee has brought up about the Shared Streets program and what we do for 2021, that seems to be a somewhat separate question.
Yeah, those are all good points. Grant, I'll let you talk in a second. So I think it's good for us to be thinking about, do we want to separate out Vilas Park Drive and do something different with it? This is just an update that was presented today, but if there's something that we either want to have on the agenda for next time or we want to ask staff to look into, and I would like to, after we hear from Grant and Elder Foster's done speaking, then maybe we can hear from Renee and Tom what our alternatives are this evening. And looks like Ken wants to talk after Grant. Go ahead, Grant.
Thank you. I guess my thoughts on the kind of procedural question is that it's an update, so we're not required to take any action. I think the way that we've been getting these updates so far, and yet, when we went forward with it, et cetera, my understanding is the staff is looking for feedback, from the commission, and it's a big part of why they're coming here. Why we've got a good opportunity for public to weigh in. So I don't think it would be out of order to make a motion with a recommendation. Obviously, it's a little bit different than if there were an actual, legislative item that we were approving or denying. But so I think that is something we could consider, is to move a recommendation to at least express the will of this body. I did have a couple of specific questions I wanted to get answered first before kind of thinking about that. And also to Harlow's point, I also wanted to talk, before we're all done with this item, I did want to talk a little bit in more detail about Atwood and also just the program in general. But specifically for the Vilas one, and Tom, thanks for weighing in. That was one of my questions. It is a parks space. I guess one of my questions is if we could just confirm kind of what the need or impact on our transportation system is with this closure. So, my sense is, both because of the nature of it being a one-way without a partner, right, without a couplet of going the other direction, given the fact that this closure seems to have not had a significant impact on the overall system, and probably even more clearly since this isn't even public right-of-way and it's not technically part of our transportation system, but rather a feature of the park. I just want to clarify, from a staff perspective, are there any concerns with maintaining this closure to motor vehicle access in terms of impact on our overall transportation system.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, traffic volumes on Violet Park Drive are quite modest, right? And we could evaluate that. I think one of the greater concerns expressed by Eric was kind of the regional function of the ice rinks, access to them. I think he felt strongly that in the winter, that's a Central Parks function, and I think he was just trying to figure out how we do that. Now, I spoke with him very briefly. I do feel like that could be a legitimate concern. And Renee, you probably have also spoken with Eric. Did you have anything to elaborate on that?
Sure. I mean, obviously, when we started this, the park was generally more closed. It was opened up to traffic on, I think, maybe 3 weekends to account for different things that were going on. Obviously, going into winter, there is the skating area there. We've also concerns raised about, does this improve? This may improve access for people with mobility issues, or it may decrease depending on the particular situation. Also, the access for fishing and things like that has come up. The ultimate plan obviously calls for a fairly large redo. I don't know if some of you have seen it, but would provide a different access point for the shelter, for the ice skating, things like that. So, obviously in the long run, they've thought through how that could work, but I mean, it definitely has raised some issues this summer, and then looking into the winter particularly as well.
Great. So just to, I guess, summarize that, yeah, no concerns from a sort of system transportation perspective. The concerns are really more about park use and park users that kind of expressed by Eric for this, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that would be, yeah.
So I guess maybe I would just, in order to kind of move things forward, then I guess I would move that the Transportation Commission recommends that to the Board of Park Commissioners that they evaluate maintaining the closure and weigh the pros and cons of that prior to opening to motor vehicle traffic. And if I get a second, I can explain that.
Is there a second? Chris, are you seconding? Ken, your hand had been up before. So Chris, is that a second?
It wasn't, but sure, yes, second.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Did you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm very supportive in maintaining the closure. I do appreciate the concern, especially with access to the ice rink. Just looking on Google Maps, I drew it out, and it looks like it's basically a quarter mile or a 5-minute walk from either parking lot, either the east or the west parking lots, to the middle of the shelter for the ice rink. Which, just to put that in perspective, that's what we consider a walkable distance to a bus stop in Madison. So I think from an overall transportation perspective, being able to get in to use that facility, even if you had parked at the parking lots that are outside of that area, seems certainly reasonable for me. But ultimately, since this is not city right of way, and I think there aren't any concerns from a transportation perspective with maintaining the closure. I would like to support that as a Transportation Commission and make sure the Board of Park Commissioners know that they shouldn't feel any pressure to open that up for any other reasons. But ultimately, I think they're the ones that are going to have to do this weighing of the access questions in terms of ice skating, et cetera. And I would be really hopeful that we could come up with a solution. As Alder Evers mentioned, there is a new habit that has started to form, and I think it would be a bit of a step backwards to reopen it. So I would hope that there is some continued work there, and if there are costs, I mean, let's try and figure that out, and maybe those costs aren't prohibitive, and maybe we can find a budget amendment to cover that if that's really what this is about. But I guess I would hope that if the solution is to do a two-way scenario, that we could put up some temporary signage and make it work, just like we've been making these shared streets work with plastic barrels, et cetera. And I think it would really meet the community's needs. But ultimately, I think this is a decision for the Board of Park Commissioners. So that's the intent with this motion.
Okay, Ken, you're next. You're muted.
Speaking to that motion, but first I just had a question. Is the current shared streets thing, is it a barrier on both the bridge side and the St. Mary side, or is it just on the bridge side?
Both sides, past the zoo parking lot and then before the bridge. So you can access the parking lots on each end.
So the question would be for, first of all, for fire and police, have they used it since with the barrier on, or has this been fine with them?
Well, I don't want to speak for them. They have definitely raised some concerns about the Shared Streets program, and we have worked with them to overcome them. Obviously, the master plan right now is looking like the recommendation is to not have a through street. So
I just want to know, but at least so far, while they would prefer to not have it blocked, they have figured a workaround so far, right?
Correct. We have worked with them on all of them to make sure that it would not impede, emergency services.
So then my second question is, if we had a blockade, let's just say by the bridge, and basically allowed the rest of the drive between the bridge and St. Mary's to be two-way, would that, I think Tag couldn't use it anymore to do his shortcuts, right? But it would, and if it reduced like 90% of that, it obviously doesn't make it totally without cars, but it makes it so that the people who are coming there are in fact park users. It's almost a guarantee that they're park users, right? I mean, maybe my teenager would make a loop around or something like that, but for the most part, people would quickly figure out you can't get across, you can't get all the way through, so you mainly are using it to go to the beach or fishing or ice skating or something, right?
Correct. I mean, it wouldn't work as a shortcut because you couldn't go all the way through.
And then my guess would be, so the city snow removal has, their equipment has removed the street in this park area, right?
I would guess that the park is clearing the park drive.
Yeah, that was one thing, is that Eric said that he did not have the equipment necessary to clear a cycle this winter at the park.
But what I'm basically getting at is, if we just blocked, instead of blocking in the middle, you should have blocked it at one end. Does that give a better access for Eric for the skaters and things like that?
I would say that it's a winter alternative that could be explored, and perhaps could even be, even the TC could explore, maybe recommend that the Park Commission explore options that prevent through traffic or something like that. That would be.
Okay. That's all.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
I think both of those comments covered most of what I was thinking. I think we've seen that this is sort of made folks realize that there's a new travel pattern where through traffic is not happening on this road. I think we should sort of uphold that to the extent that we can. Yet with winter coming, I think it sort of has called more attention to the issue of the access to the parking lots for folks who are going to be driving. And the master plan, I think, calls for a more thought out arrangement of access to parking. So if this is going to be somewhat permanent in the meantime, I think the city and parks will have to think about how we prevent the through traffic while making sure that access to the parking lots is there. So I think everything's been said. That's my thought.
Okay, so Grant, the motion that we have on the floor right now is a motion to recommend that the TC recommend to the Board of Park Commissioners that they evaluate maintaining the closure and weigh the pros and cons prior to opening it to motor vehicles. And I don't know if you consider it friendly to add and explore options that prevent through traffic, Grant, because I think that's sort of similar to what you were talking about. When you're talking about weighing pros and cons, are you including in that, including exploring options that prevent through traffic?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. So what I have is that the TC recommend to the Board of Park Commissioners that they evaluate maintaining the closure of Vilas Park Drive and weigh the pros and cons prior to opening it to motor vehicles, including exploring options that prevent through traffic. Did I catch everything there? Alder Evers, how does that work with what you've been thinking about? And Harold has his hand up. Harold, do you mind if we hear from Alder Evers first, or would you like to go first?
That's fine.
Okay, then I'm sorry, Ken and then Harold. So go ahead, Alder Evers.
Yes, I think this, in a sense, referring this to Parks Commission with recommendations, as you suggested. And for those of you who have some interest in this on Transportation Commission, perhaps you'll want to show up at that Parks Commission meeting and offer some of your expert advice. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Patrick, maybe you can find out when that is and let people know. Ken, you're next. Go ahead.
So, sort of to clarify, for Grant, this is sort of implicitly saying it wasn't our call to begin with, right?
Yeah, this is Parks land, and so it's primarily they need to figure out what to do, but it had also, I think, function, and most people probably didn't even realize that and thought it was a city street. And for that cut through and traffic, it has functioned as a city street. So that's the sort of dual role that Tom mentioned earlier. So yeah.
No, I just wanted to make that clear that we're basically saying now that we think about it, it wasn't our call, and it's really it seemed to go well in the summer, but it's really Parks' call as far as what to do going forward.
Well, Tom, can you clarify, because you said that there's dual responsibility.
Okay, so my background is working with state and federal funding, and as I do DCI map, just as Eric said, this is fully under Madison Parks ownership, and in my previous role, we would not be able to do anything on this land without express permission from the Parks Commission. And then if there's federal involvement, which Eric said there was, there's another layer. Now, Bill Bremer is laughing because he kind of knows the process that I talk about. So, so this is a little bit different. That it's. I think the history of it is probably fascinating. If you think about the Parks and Pleasure Drive and how all that stuff got rolled into the Parks Department, if you want to go back, 90 years, but I think you're correct. The jurisdiction of this is under parks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else, Ken?
No.
Okay, Harold, you're next.
Thank you. I think this hopefully counts as a friendly amendment. I think the language of the motion as it stands currently talks about the closure of Vilas Park Drive. And I think Jim Lorman made a good comment that it's not a closure. So the restriction of motor vehicle traffic on Vilas Park Drive might be the more precise language because, yeah, it is open to people walking and using other non-motorized modes of transportation. I hope that counts as a friendly amendment.
Yeah, that's good addition. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Ian. I agree with Harold that we don't want to say, we want to make sure that bikes can use that. So the only thing we want to do is preclude motor vehicles from using it. And I guess I have a question for Tom. Does the city plow that, city streets plow that in the wintertime in the past? And if so, can't we continue to do that for this until Parks finishes their master plan to get to the parking lots?
Yeah. If I knew I was going to be at this meeting.
Renee, do you know the answer to that?
So I don't know exactly. I know in talking about some of the alternatives, it did appear that Parks was the one who would be maintaining that.
Yeah.
It could be that to Orchard Street, it is streets, and after that, it is Parks, but I'm not 100% sure. And unfortunately, Eric had other commitments. Eric not from Parks, so he couldn't make it.
I guess my concern is whatever we did last winter, let's do it this winter. And if it's a dead end street, it's a dead end street or dead end thoroughfare. And if it only goes to a parking lot, that's okay, as far as I'm concerned. And as far as resources, I understand Parks doesn't have all the equipment they necessarily want to make it for just bicycles or walkways, but plow the streets so you can go to the parking lot, to go to the parking to the ice skating rink. So that's my opinion, and I agree that you can have just a closure on one end, and that's great. That'll work, accomplish. But I don't want to go backwards and let through traffic get out there again.
So Eric did send me an email like at 5:05 today. I feel like he does not see a safe way to have two-way traffic on this drive right now. But he's open to suggestions. And so I think that if the Transportation Commission voted on the recommendation that's before you, TE could look at options with Eric. And I don't know when the next Board of Park Commissioners meets, but we could scratch our heads together and see if there's a winter option that decreases through traffic but allows access to the ice rinks.
Okay, I'm going to try and is there a further discussion? I'm going to see if I can do my best to read what our motion is as amended, friendly amended, that the Transportation Commission recommend to the Board of Park Commissioners that they evaluate maintaining the restriction to motor vehicle traffic on Vilas Park Drive and weigh the pros and cons prior to opening Vilas Park Drive to motor vehicles, including exploring options that prevent through traffic. Yes? I get it all? All right. Further discussion. Okay, seeing no hands. All those in favor of the motion, we're going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless we see hands raised, in which case we can either record an opposed vote or have a roll call. If you'd like to register that opinion, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands raised, this will be referred to the Board of Park Commissioners. And Patrick, if you could find out when that next meeting is or when this would be on the agenda and let everybody know so that folks from the commission can attend and offer and, register and speak if they desire. Grant, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a couple questions about the Atwood one and just the broader program.
Sure.
I don't know if we were at that stage or not, but
yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we're done with speaking about the specifics on Violas Park Drive. So let's move on to the other ones. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Just full disclosure, so that the Atwood is in District 15. So I'm going to wear both hats at the same time here and be Alder and Transportation Commissioner. So I guess first I'll just say I think it was a big success. I did hear from one resident that didn't think it was a great idea, but overwhelmingly I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about it. I think it was really great to be able to test out what is the proposal for the permanent configuration there. So I think that's all super positive. Renee, as you mentioned, the barrels are, we're not optimal with what we had, and certainly better than nothing. But I guess one of my questions was, assuming the budget as proposed passes with the additional funding for kind of more street Legos, as I'll call them, do you have a thought about what we could use in lieu of the barrels, and will we have the funds to be able to purchase those to put something back in early spring?
Tom, do you want to answer? You want me to take that? I mean, we definitely have been looking at different equipment options should the budget pass that we could get, and we know that this is an area that seems to have been quite successful. Like you, not mostly positive comments. The one or two people who didn't like it, but generally favorable. Definitely, people having bikes off that narrow sidewalk. So I think kind of looking at what the options are that would work, to be safe, but not take up the space and not look like an orange barrel.
So I'll add on Atwood Avenue, if you go out there now, you'll see that there's about 10 barrels that are not barrels, but they're a little bit narrower. They're about a foot wide. I think they're just east of the park entrance. That would probably be a more appropriate use on Atwood Avenue. Again, we hope that Atwood Avenue gets funded relatively soon so that we don't have to use temporary measures. I planted ideas in both Yang and Renee's head over the last week that other places where we've had shared streets, we might be able to move away from traffic control to maybe not a permanent fixture, but more of a something less temporary. Like for instance, South Shore Drive is an example where right now we have barricades that get moved around and the like. Could we explore a planter? You know what I mean? That maybe we could put a planter there. That means that we'd have to, use a forklift and put it on a terrace, over the winter or something like that. But and if we had a planter with the neighbors put stuff in it, flowers or something. So we haven't worked out all the details. We'd have to work it out with streets, but Toronto is a good example. Toronto uses planters to delineate a lot of their bikeways, and can we do something that's less temporary in nature than barricades, but not as permanent as a curb, something that could be attractive and a little bit less temporary.
Well, let me just put out there, and I share your hope that we can get Atwood reconstructed sooner than what it looks like now. But it's been a number of years, and it keeps sliding to the end of the pack. So I think we have to be prepared that it may be 5 years or more before it actually gets done. So I guess my hope would be, especially in this location, really be thinking about something that could be that not temporary and not permanent, but sort of interim, and plastic bollards seem like something that a lot of communities are using. They don't take up a ton of space. I don't know if, we don't have to get into all the details of like what works or doesn't, but just, I guess my hope would be maybe even get something that could stay in over the next winter. I get that, the current setup isn't going to make sense to leave there, but just thinking about something that we could install that again could last a couple of years and that could stay up through the winter. Obviously that would require thinking through the snow removal component, et cetera. But I think for this location, it just really would make a lot of sense to try and maintain that, feature until we are able to fully reconstruct.
We could talk about it more offline. There's less use over the winter, on the cycle path, but we could explore what's being done in Minneapolis, and we could talk about it offline. So.
Yeah, I think it would be great. The winter maintenance on the sidewalk is really problematic. They don't get the bridge cleared, et cetera. So I think it would be worth looking at. And then to your other point, Tom, about like planters, I was going to kind of raise that also. I'd love to think about this becoming kind of a standard, program that we do, especially in, I'm thinking of some of the conversations we've started at the traffic calming subcommittee. This program feels like a way to kind of, when we identify areas that could have some bike enhancements or where we're looking to reduce cut through traffic or these sorts of things, that we could potentially use a program like this, to put out the ugly barrels first, test it out, figure it out. And then for those locations that are successful, where we do get the good feedback, then, swap out those very temporary measures with something like what you're saying, Tom, get some nicer looking planters. And it's like we should start thinking about this as kind of like an entryway in longer term modifications where we can, continue to pull back space from, pretty much motor vehicle access and give it more to people access and really use this program as a way to test and pilot that. And then, but then not just, give up and move on somewhere else, but where it is successful, and if it means continuing to invest in more supplies to leave those out there as we move on to the next spot, I think that's a pretty good investment and would, be happy to help support that.
So I agree. And I think we need to move in that direction. We have a lot of partners that we have to work with, right? We have to work with streets. We have to work with police and fire. And I think when I came to the city, I thought I was on a small boat, but really I'm on an ocean liner, and so we make changes slowly, but I think we'll be trying to move in that direction.
Great. Well, just thank you for doing it this year. It was obviously a good opportunity with COVID, but I think this program should continue and expand and really completely separate from COVID. And we should really also just start to think about, this was about giving more space for people to physically distance themselves. I think in my mind going forward, it's about giving space for people to walk and bike and not be around cars. So I think, just thinking about how we redefine it and continue to expand it, I think it was a really great program. And we can get stuff put back up on Atwood. It's, very, very early, like March 15th, let's push ourselves on that one.
If you guarantee no snow after March 15th, that'd be great.
If it snows, it'll melt. It'll be fine.
I'm going to deflect that compliment to Yang, Renee, and Mark Winter. Okay. So we had the idea early, but I'm going to say that Yang, Renee, and Mark Winter made it happen. And the staff at the shop too.
Harold, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also very supportive of everything that has just been said and thinking like large picture, thinking about it as this, I think as Grant described, this multi-step process where this year, in March, we tried, or it was not March, but we tried something, as we have seen, Clyde Gallagher didn't work, some other locations didn't work. I think with some of the projects, we have, very clearly Vilas Park based on the public input today. I think that has been a great success. Some of them are probably somewhere in between, like was Mifflin a success or not? I'm not totally sure. For some people, it probably was. For some people, it was not. But overall, the program has been a success. And this approach of let's try it, gather feedback. And if it is successful, as in Vilas Park Drive, as it has been on Atwood Avenue, find a way to continue that success without having a way of doing that, as you said, Tom, by having more permanent fixtures. I was also thinking with planters, I mean, not only are they more attractive, I think this is also something where we could do neighborhood involvement, where, if the city has an approved planter design, I'm pretty sure, at least in some neighborhoods, it would be possible, like people would be happily putting the work together of building that planter, and then maybe the city puts on the appropriate MUTCD signage and make sure it's reflective enough and all that. But having that step in between, we pour concrete and make a choke point at the entrance to the street, or we have the construction barricade that falls over in the wind, like having that in between point, I think is a really good step forward. I also want to say I'm very appreciative of the survey that has been included in the materials. So I think that's good, and making sure that gets distributed widely, because, this is not something that only affects the people living on the corridors where the shared streets have been implemented. But, I don't live near Vilas Park, but I use it all the time, and other streets as well. So I think gathering that input is very valuable as well. So thanks for all the work on that. And let's keep this going, keep refining it, make sure it gets the resources that it needs. And I think also the winter part, figuring that out will be important. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. So Renee, if you could maybe remind people, if you'd like to get feedback.
And you're really quiet. I don't know if you can get a little closer.
Is that better?
Yeah, it's a little
better.
Still pretty quiet though.
So maybe I should turn off my video. I'm going to try that. Is that better? Did that help?
Yes.
Can you hear me better? Okay. Plus, you don't have to look at me. There you go. If people have feedback for Renee in terms of the actual survey, I thought it looked great myself. But also, if you could comment on how, Harold raised a great point. How are you going to distribute it? Because there are people who live there, certainly, and those are easier for you to find. But how do you find the people who use it, or, make sure that you get the survey to the right people?
Sure. Obviously, one of the things that we're planning to do is to put out a press release, both to let people know when the barricades would be coming down, and then to encourage them to fill out the survey. Also, just through neighborhood associations, through the bike email list we have, the neighborhood resource teams, really just trying to get the word out as much as possible. Also, hopefully the press will share it. That seems to be very popular with people on both sides of an issue reaching out to me, is if they see it in the press somewhere. So really, I do want to get feedback from people who used it, both walking, biking, people who typically are drivers, to get their opinions and try to just get sort of as much of a well-rounded input as possible.
Okay, great. Any other comments on this particular item? A lot of good discussion. I recall when this came to us in April, we had massive amounts of discussion on it as well. So it's a highly popular topic. And again, thanks to, it sounds like Yang, Renee, and Mark Winter were the ones who really made it a success in terms of getting it implemented. So thanks very much to them. And please keep us posted with regard to what happens on Vilas Park Drive. Okay, any other comments? Okay, let's move on to Cedar Street. Who from staff is going to be handling Cedar Street?
Andy Zwig from engineering.
Okay, hi Andy, go ahead. So our typical, do we have anybody registered to speak, Patrick? It didn't look like it.
No.
Okay, if you want to go ahead with your presentation, Andy.
Sure. So again, I'm Andy Zwig from engineering. I'm here to get your approval for this Cedar Park Street intersection improvements. So we had a public meeting on May 27th, and then we came to TC on June 21st and it was referred for more review. We came back on July 27th, or on July 22nd, had more discussion. I was recommended to do more public outreach. So on August 20th, we had a public meeting. We got a lot of feedback at the meeting. We went back to the drawing board, created new alternatives. We had a public meeting yesterday and got good feedback on one of the alternatives that the public was interested in. So I'm here tonight to, I guess, show you the 5 alternatives that was presented at the public meeting yesterday and tell you, I guess, which one that they selected. So if you can all see my screen, we have alternative 1 here. This one has
Andy, we're just seeing your desktop right now.
Yeah, you are. Okay.
It's a great picture, Andy, but we're just seeing your family.
You are seeing my family.
We are.
Okay. How about that one?
Yes, there you go.
That's better. Yes.
Okay. So here's the 5 alternatives we presented yesterday. Alternative 1, it's been carried through from all 3 public meetings. We initially heard feedback back in spring about cut-through traffic, which is why we kind of created alternative 1. The public is not interested in alternative 1 anymore. So we moved to alternative 2, which we presented, which is very similar to alternative 1, except we removed the island and we're able to tighten up these crosswalks. So I'll flip back to alternative 1, because of this traffic island, our crosswalks were set back because the turning movements were back farther. With alternative 2, we were able to tighten up the crosswalks. So moving forward, alternative 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all the same in the intersection. At the public meeting in August, we had learned from the Capitol View and Bram neighborhoods about their use of Beld Street and how that street is an important connection to Park Street, that they wanted it to connect to the grocery store, which is kind of why we got rid of the traffic island. So that kind of new information about those neighborhoods and the importance of Beld Street kind of formulated some of the alternatives coming up. Moving to alternative 3, very similar to alternative 2, except we've created a choke point here on existing Cedar. We do not allow eastbound traffic through this choke point except bikes. Again, alternative 2 and 3, not really liked by the public, specifically the Capitol View and Bram neighborhoods. So then move into alternative 4, which is the alternative that the public selected. It was the overwhelming majority of what people are interested. So we have no traffic island, full turning movements, tight crosswalks at the intersection. But with this alternative, Beld Street connects directly to Park Street and existing Cedar connects to Beld Street. In this scenario, bicycles on New Cedar Street would, they're in their bike lane, they would exit to a wider sidewalk, cross Park Street. Under all alternatives, there is a pedestrian push button light proposed here. The bikes would continue through Beld Street. For bikes heading westbound, they would exit off the street, cross on a wider sidewalk, cross here. Now this corner, as we did hear from the public, they were kind of wondering why this sidewalk is pretty tight and not wider. We are very tight on space in this corner. We do not want to impede the existing pick and save property. We plan to kind of update this corner when the pick and save property redevelops. Moving to alternative 5, which is very similar to alternative 4, except we've choked down existing Cedar Street, similar as we did in alternative 3, where we do not allow eastbound traffic, but we allow eastbound bikes. Westbound traffic would still be allowed to exit Cedar. This particular option, it was liked by a few people on Cedar Street. This homeowner right here was against this option. Their driveway is here. So if they wanted to exit their driveway and park in front of their house, they would have to drive south on Beld. They would have to take Hickory and turn back onto Cedar. This alternative also wasn't liked, that if you're a parked car here, you're going to have to make a U-turn to travel eastbound, which we heard from the public is not good in the winter because there's a large hill here. So that's why alternative 4 was the overwhelming option that they selected. Now, the people that were against it, we discussed that when existing Cedar Street is reconstructed, which is in 2022, which is another public meeting process, Transportation Commission board approval, that at that time we would come with alternatives about the street in general and maybe traffic calming devices that we could use. We could remove parking to, narrow the street, help with this large curve. We could possibly do speed bumps. We could possibly do a traffic circle at Hickory and Cedar. So it wasn't necessarily the choke point that they wanted for those that wanted alternative 5. It was more of alternatives for traffic calming on existing Cedar all the way to Gilson to help with cut-through traffic. So I think that was good information coming out, as those folks that maybe wanted alternative 5 were still okay with alternative 4, with possible traffic calming measures discussed with existing Cedar reconstruction, which is a whole new public process, which will take place in 2021. So with that, again, the public was liked alternative 4. So with that, I can take questions.
Okay, who has questions? Ken, go ahead.
Andy, could you just, are we looking at 5 or 4 now? We're looking at 5, right?
This is 4. Alternative 5 just adds this little choke point here where it would not allow eastbound traffic, but eastbound bikes.
Andy, could you just show your cursor, show where up at the top of the page you can see what page it is? And if you look at it up at the top of the page, you can see 5 of 5. So that's how I was watching.
Yep. So also top of the page, down at the bottom right corner is 4 and 5 too. But yes, currently I'm on alternative 5, which just creates a bump out here to prevent
go back to 4 then.
Yep.
And so that allows the owner on the corner to get from his driveway and go to the front of his house?
Yes. And I also should point out that the owner of the Cargo Coffee liked alternative 4, and it was important to members of the residents around Cargo Coffee that his opinion means a lot for that business, and he wanted to make sure that the alternative he selected would work with this property owner. They have a relationship.
Can you just show us what I've driven past there, but I just don't have a clear sense. Where is the entrance, the street entrance for cars for cargo?
That would be, they have one right here.
Okay.
I believe they have one on Park Street. Yes, they have a Park Street driveway up here. But yeah, they have an entrance off of, and that, I think that's their main entrance that they have.
And then one more question. While it would have a crossing light, this is not slated for a stoplight, right?
It is not. With any alternative, we're planning on installing the signal conduit for a future signal. But at this time, it does not meet any of the warrants that traffic engineering follows to install a signal.
No, I'm not suggesting. I just wanted to be sure that we're not talking about a signaled intersection.
Correct. No signal. Just a pedestrian push button at the south crosswalk.
Thanks.
And the east side of the intersection will be built in 2022. The west side of the intersection, including these medians, we want to build in 2021. The reason why we're presenting it to you all in one is because it's all related, and plus we would like geometric approval because we have to pursue real estate acquisition on this house, which takes time, which is why this will be built in 2022.
Okay, I don't see any additional. There we go. Harold, go ahead.
Sorry, just very quickly. So where there's the Belt Triangle Park, and which is now a larger area. What's the planned land use for that?
I haven't had further discussions with Park at this time. I wanted to see which alternative we were going to be moving forward with to talk about, some park expansion. I know that, we still would have, right of way along here. So this area would still be right of way. But at this time, I do not know about any additional park expansion or improvement. But that's something that I would, once an alternative selected, have a discussion with the design team and the parks department on that, on maybe what can be done with this space, if anything.
Okay, thank you. But the plan is to have it as a park still.
Correct. Yeah, we're not taking out any of the park.
Okay. I just want to make sure that whatever is going to go in there is going to work with the design. And I mean, if it's going to stay a park space, then that's probably the least problematic land use from that perspective. So that's fine then. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Grant, go ahead.
Thank you. And I kind of had a little more comment than questions. I don't know if we were done with questions or not.
Nobody else has their hand up, so go ahead.
All right, thanks. So I guess first, thanks for the work on this. I think this is, I like 4 and 5. I think it's a really big improvement over what was on there before. It makes a ton of sense to realign Bell Street as the primary connection with South Park. It is a important connector for the neighborhoods there, and having Cedar Street kind of tee into Bell instead of the Bell Park connection. So I think that makes a lot of sense. One quick suggestion, in the more detailed work, once you get there, I'm not sure we need a separate cycling apron on that kind of northeast corner of at Park Street. Right there. I just want to think about just combining that with the pedestrian apron, just as one more thing to keep clean in the winter, and et cetera. But you can look at that when you're in the detailed work. My only concern with going with 4 over 5, and ultimately, particularly if those on Cedar Street are supportive of 4, I don't have huge concerns with it. But I guess I am a little bit concerned with the idea and the notion that, well, we can work on traffic calming later. I mean, I think this whole intersection and I think the objections to it really started with the objections of particular Cedar Street residents, and this goes back, 15 years, I think, to the adopted plans for this neighborhood, where they were always super, super concerned about this sort of new cut through traffic. And I think the whole rationale for that island in Alt 1 that started the whole conversation and that got, I think it made things not really great for pedestrian crossings, et cetera, was to basically be a diverter to stop traffic from cutting across Cedar to get out onto Olin, which I actually do think is a real concern to consider with the new development. And it will be a shortcut. And I think this new realignment helps a little bit because there's a little bit of curve in there. But I do think that, as it stands in Alt 4, that still is going to be a problem. And I guess I'm a little bit worried about kind of getting buy-in from neighbors by saying, well, we can come back and deal with that later. That we've started talking about that in the traffic calming subcommittee. And one of our likely recommendations is that we need to really tackle the traffic calming component with a street reconstruction project. I know historically we've kind of just like to keep those separate and say, well, we're just trying to get this job done. Somebody else can come deal with traffic calming later. But, the particular traffic calming that is going to be needed here is to divert cut through traffic. It's not really just like the speeding part is comes along with the diverter or with the cut through traffic. And so, honestly, the best way to do that would be to not allow eastbound traffic onto Cedar from Eld. It sounds like there's one particular concern from one resident, but I guess I would just be really hesitant to give up on that, and then have it show up on a list where we got to pay more money later and try and fix it and put in speed humps and those don't really work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I still feel like Alt 5 I think accomplishes all of these things, but does speak to that really significant concern that has been raised again for years and years. So my only hesitation is just I wasn't at the meeting. I don't know how the conversation went, but if folks there are convinced that, okay, well, we can live with 4 because we're promised that we're going to get a fix to our concerns later, I think that's not a great approach. So I would just really make sure that I think we should figure out if we don't think it's a diverter, then we should include what that traffic calming feature is going to be in there, because from my perspective and my experience, the way that we would deal with that is to not allow eastbound traffic entering right there. And so I guess, I still would lean towards number 5. I think that accomplishes all the goals. It really meets the needs of everybody and addresses that initial concern. And I'm a little bit worried that Alt 4 would not quite do that. And I don't want to give people the false hope that we're going to be able to fix that later with some other different approach, because I'm not seeing it. So I guess that would be my feedback on it. But I think overall, really good work, and the overall alignment for either 4 or 5, I think is the right way to go. And I'm glad the extra time went into it, and I'm glad that the public got a chance to speak to it. And sounds like we've got something really close to working for everybody. So thank you.
So there was concerns with Alternative 5 about people taking Spruce Street and people taking the other streets. The people that this came up at public meeting in August, that people on Spruce, a few people on Spruce Street, didn't want an increase of traffic because we prevented traffic on Cedar Street. So I just wanted to throw that out, that we did hear some feedback on pressure on other streets. And it was talked about that on projects we usually wait after to do traffic calming, but yesterday it was talked about, but maybe on this project, because we know about potential problems, that it might be smart to do it together and present those options at a public meeting we have for the reconstruction of Cedar next year.
I think that makes a lot of sense. With this ultimate, is that the portion you really need sorted out right now is around the intersection with Park, is that correct?
Correct. I need the medians set and the curb line set so I can move forward with design and get it out for bid.
But essentially, 4 versus 5 would and could play out during that Cedar Street reconstruct project. Basically, is there a diverter or not on the Cedar Street thing?
Correct. Yes. And we're looking. We also want to set the geometry so we can buy that house. But 4 or 5,
either
we still have to buy the house.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good to me. And I get that, of course, the people on Spruce are going to say, well, we don't want it to come here. We heard that when we put the diverter on Mifflin, and the people on Dayton were really concerned, and, that never played out. And I think if you just look at the road network, I don't see Spruce turning into that. I don't think that really makes sense. If they have to turn left and they're going down Park, Olin is right there at that point. I think it is a very different sort of cut through connection for Cedar. But in either case, I think it sounds like the best place to kind of have that discussion is when you do the Cedar Street project. And I guess, and I'm glad to hear that the idea is to incorporate needed traffic calming or diverter or whatever it is as part of that project. I'm very supportive of that. So I think I'm happy to support, Ald 4 as the, sort of what moves forward. And then just keep in mind that as you get into that Cedar Street project, let's make sure that that everybody understands what the options are there, and that they may end up wanting to go back to the Alt 5 at that point if that diverter is felt like it would do the best job at meeting their needs then. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Thanks. I also think this is a great compromise to sort of accommodate all those needs that came up. So thanks for coming up with this. One observation that I was curious about is that on Beld Street, I realized that the curve is going to sort of calm traffic a bit. And with that curve, you may need that section of the road to be wider. I'm just wondering if Beld is wider than it needs to be here. I think it is wider further down, but that's because of parking. So I guess if there was an opportunity to tighten up anything in there, I would look at that. I know it's weird on a curve though, but that was the only thing that caught my eye.
Okay. Ken?
Patrick, are there any people who want to make comments from the public?
I had asked earlier and he said no.
So I would move that we approve option number 4 for the roadway geometry for Cedar and South Park.
Okay, there's a motion by Ken on alternative number 4. Is there a second? Bill? I assume that's a second?
It is a second.
Okay. Before we go further with any other discussion, I saw that Alder Evers joined us again. Did you have any comments? I'm sure you've been very involved with the neighborhood with regard to this project.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. I'm one of those weird places where I'm monitoring 2 meetings at one time, one on my phone and one on my laptop. It's multitasking in the age of COVID. Here's my sense. Yes, historically, residents on Cedar Street have expressed concern, and that concern came much more to the fore when we were talking about the grocery store and some of the public information meetings going back to last summer. It was an ongoing concern that folks, once New Cedar goes all the way out to Fitch Hatchery, that this could be subject to cut through traffic in a different sort of way. But the engagement process at the meeting that we held yesterday, which was a positive response to concerns not only in District 13, but more pointedly to residents in District 14 and Bram's Addition and other parts of Alder Sherry Carter's district. These folks do rely heavily on Beld Street as a thoroughfare. And so to privilege Beld as opposed to East Cedar with respect to this intersection really seemed like a good decision and evidence that our resident engagement process works. We have, I think, solved that particular problem. My sense of where the residents are on Cedar, if there is, in fact, not just a hand waving, but assurance that the type of design measures and traffic calming can be done, whether it's at the intersection of Hickory and Cedar, where you would put in some kind of roundabout or an island and you have speed humps, that this is articulated in the process with a real commitment to address traffic calming. There was a sense from residents there that their voices would be heard, and they were reassured that they were finally being heard, perhaps for the very first time, that this would in fact be addressed. If the board feels like the only way this can be accomplished would be to advance number 5, I believe, looking at, I wasn't able to sit in on all of Andy's presentation. I imagine he explained the complication that would have for the one longtime resident who's lived there on Cedar and what would become the very first house once the other one is demolished, lived there for decades and it is an elderly resident in good standing in the neighborhood. He would be, that individual would be severely inconvenienced. I think this is a jump ball, in other words, and I will leave it to you to determine. All I can say is I believe that the residents their voices were heard, and I want to commend staff for going the extra mile to make sure of that. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second. So the motion in front of us is to approve alternative number 4. Is there any further discussion? I don't see any hands raised, so we'll assume a unanimous consent vote in favor of alternative 4, unless we see any hands raised. I do not see any hands raised, so we have approved alternative number 4. And thank you very much to staff. Obviously, there's been a lot of great connection with the neighborhood, and I think that's exactly what everybody was hoping would occur. So thanks much for going that extra mile.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay, next we have item 9, the 2021 Public Works Transportation Projects. Chris?
Hi, so we have 2 projects, or sort of, 2 projects we wanted to share with you tonight. One, the Russell Street Capital City Path Crossing, and then the 2021 Bikeways program. So first, I think Jim's going to talk about the Russell Street project.
Yeah, so in 2021, we have a planned reconstruction project on some local roads on the east side. It includes Russell Street, Jennifer Street, Helena Street. So in particular, what we wanted to bring to the commission was the bike path crossing of Russell Street near Eastwood. What was included in the packet is kind of a quick update to this crossing. You can kind of see on the aerial that we have pretty wide curb radii at the intersection. So the first thing that we plan to do with the project is tighten these curb radii, make that a little bit constricted intersection. I think Russell Street is 24 feet wide right now. And then initially we could also widen the path out to 12 feet, then pull the path back a little bit from Eastwood so we could get another ramp in for the PED crossing here, which also serves as a bike crossing. The cul-de-sac block of Russell in between Winnebago and Eastwood is currently scheduled for reconstruction in 2022. So we could look at improving this crossing and widening that as part of that project. So that's kind of one option that we have taken a look at. Also, the red lines, I quick sketch this on here. Another thing that we've been discussing amongst staff is we could bring the path back away from Eastwood a little bit further. So this would be roughly 20 feet or so back from the travel lanes on Eastwood. And this would allow, so the stop bar for northbound traffic on Russell would stop on the south side of the path. So this would allow for vehicles to stop at the path, and then they'd have space to get across the path while waiting and yielding to any through traffic on Eastwood to make the right turn if they had to. And moving the path back further would also allow for a right turning vehicle off of Eastwood to kind of clear the travel lane, and then also wait for any cyclists or pedestrians using the crossing here as well. So it just gives a little bit more space for those right turning vehicles. The one drawback to the crossing here is there's a lot of dense tree cover. This is mostly evergreens and pine trees. So as vehicles are approaching from the south on Russell, they wouldn't have good visibility of anybody coming on the bike path. However, there would be a stop sign here, so they would still have to stop. And by the time they stop at the stop bar at the path crossing, they would have better visibility of anybody coming from the west. We would probably have to prune up some of these trees a bit to kind of clear some of that visibility, but that would improve things. So the opposite of that is also cyclists coming from the west as they're approaching the crossing wouldn't have good visibility of any approaching vehicles from this side either. So it's kind of the gist for what we're looking at this. So what we're looking to get is the commission's input on this, preference for kind of design of this crossing, and how we could include that with our reconstruction project.
Grant, go ahead. And then Chris, you're next.
Thanks for sharing this, Jim. Yeah, I have a pretty strong preference for the realigned version that you were describing. It's really consistent with kind of current thinking and best practice around, I mean, it's essentially as a protected intersection. And particularly that right turning movement off of the fast road. I'm forgetting the name.
Eastwood,
yeah. That right hook movement. I mean, it's not a super high volume movement, but it is one that it's just not great. You know, if we're thinking in terms of Vision Zero and how do we make the safest one, I like it. It shortens the actual crossing even more. You know, obviously just less time to be exposed. You know, one other thing, I don't know. You know what is the curb to curb on here? What would it be? Something like 26 or something
on Russell Street?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's 24 face to face.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's another thing. It could probably be tightened up. Even like I don't think we would need or want. We obviously don't need parking right at the crossing itself, nor between if it were realigned between there and Eastwood. So I mean, it could probably be tightened all the way up to 20, which would give even I think it would help address any kind of visibility issues. It would just it would get cyclists out even that much further beyond the trees. So I think I would just look at that as just really tighten that down even further. And then also looking at the potential to have that be tabletopped. I mean, I know that always introduces some, complications with stormwater management, but all of those things in concert, if it were, really tightened up to just 20 feet is what I meant, curb to curb, or tabletopped, and a little bit of trimming of the trees. I think that would be way better than what we've got now, and I think also a good amount better than the other version. So that would be my input, and thanks for working on it.
Sure. And I guess I didn't mention this when I was presenting on this too, that we did review potential impacts for if we would raise this crossing, and it would work okay for a crossing closer to the intersection, just for how things could be constructed with the ramps and the drainage way on Eastwood that could be kind of combined into one. But then as Russell starts out kind of flat and then drops off towards Helena here, that when we move the path crossing further south, it complicates things more from a drainage perspective.
Well, and maybe, if maybe not a full kind of tabletop, but even something in between, some of the Cap City crossings that have been done where they're kind of soft, at least on the pathway, and it's split the difference or something, or maybe you have it raised on one side. I mean, I still think the realignment outweighs the benefit of just a straight tabletopping. So I would definitely be still in favor of going that route.
Sure. Sounds good.
Chris, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. I would second a lot of those thoughts. I think obviously when the first alignment, I really appreciated the tightening the curves and the improving the crossings. I think if you were to move back to the red line, though, I don't have strong concerns about the traffic that would be coming from Russell Street, partly because they would be looking to the left anyway, because that's where the traffic is coming from. And, that traffic is going to be generally quite a bit slower. I think the real concern here when you're biking east is you're concerned that someone's going to be taking a right and like constantly looking over your shoulder at the same time that you're doing this sort of S curve movement. And whether or not someone's making that turn, that's just like a constant thing that I think you're doing heading east. So I think straightening it out and pulling it back could probably help that a lot. So
thank you, Chris.
That's all.
Harold?
Yeah, I was going to make the same point about the visibility, that the bigger concern is people being in the blind spot when you turn from Eastwood onto Russell. And so the concern for the people going on Russell, I think that's not that big of a deal. And so therefore the realignment is really a good thing. I guess after you said that the tabletopping is maybe not an option for the pullback, I was like, I guess that is a trade-off, because I think there is real value in doing the tabletopping. Also saves us maintenance cost if we don't have to paint it green. So I'm a little bit torn, and maybe, take a look if it is possible in some way to have the farther setback and still some form of tabletopping. But yeah, that would be nice. But otherwise, I guess I'm torn between the two options. I think both of them are pretty nice. Thank you.
And we can certainly still continue to review that. We actually haven't even gotten the official, detailed survey data out here. So this has been based off of our own engineering field reviews and things.
Ken, go ahead.
I'd like both Jim's opinion, but then also I'm assuming possibly Chris and Grant have some observations as well. If you move it from the closer to the street to the red line thing, what's the actual studies show as far as the ability of riders to figure out whether traffic is coming, either going to make a left turn into this or make a right turn? Is it better to be closer to the curb, or is, I'm just trying, I don't bike enough on these kind of situations to try to figure out how do you actually do this? I imagine you're turning your head, but if you are relying on the mirror, is your mirror picking up traffic coming that's going in the same direction as you are? And if so, is the red crossing reduce your ability to use a mirror? Any of you can bring in.
Harold, did you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I was going to address that. Ken, just to clarify, so using the mirror for the people driving, you mean?
No, the mirror. So let's just say you're going from left to right here, and you can sort of from the red line still see oncoming traffic that might be making a left turn. My question is,
sorry, Eastwood is one way.
Same direction as you're going. What are the mechanics of the bicyclist checking that traffic that's going in the same direction?
Yeah, and so just to clarify, Eastwood is one way, so there wouldn't be any left turns from Eastwood onto Russell. And I think in general, your point is which, from the visibility perspective, which one is preferable if you're on the bike. And I think it's very clear that having those setback intersection where the car traffic is more straight, and as you said, not going perpendicular to you, where you have to turn your head more than 90 degrees to see the cars, versus if the car is coming at you at a 90-degree angle, this visibility is better both from a perspective driving as well as from when you're on the bike. And I personally, at that intersection, I have had encounters where people turn right and did not see me because I guess I was in their blind spot at that point. So I think, the studies are pretty clear on that. As Grant has said, when we have this concept of the protected intersection, the idea is that you move the conflict point farther away from the intersection in order to deal with these visibility concerns. I hope that answers your question.
Renee, did you have an answer as well?
Sure, I was just going to kind of chime in with sort of similar to what Harold said, that pulling it back to that red area where it's going to give everyone a little bit more time. I mean, the one problem with being close to that intersection is you don't realize that a car is even going to turn, whereas having it pulled back gives you that extra time to realize what's happening, and gets you more out of the blind spot of someone who's driving a motor vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
and the other benefit to this too, I know when I've been riding through this intersection, I've had a lot of instances where a car is stopped on this crossing waiting to turn right onto Eastwood. If you're looking further to the west and you're a northbound vehicle, there are actually some trees along Eastwood that you do have to get pretty far out to really see oncoming traffic real well. So bringing it back does have that added benefit where a vehicle could stop up here as they're trying to wait as well. But I think, yeah, definitely historically, this intersection was kind of set up with the thought that a crossing here would be better, it'd be a more traditional crossing location, more expected, but especially with the wider curb radii there, vehicles can take that turn pretty quick and you're not really expecting it.
Thank you.
Okay, is that all you had, Ken?
Yes.
Okay, Grant, go ahead.
Thanks. And yeah, just in terms of that sort of that shift in thinking, Ken, so let's say like 15, 20 years ago, the recommendation was to get it as close as possible to the roadway for a side path, because it would, you know, what you don't want is to be in the blind spot of the driver, right? So the idea was we'll get it as close as possible, and it's more likely that you'll be in the periphery, but not in the blind spot. But that's really still not very great. And so what the latest research and the new thinking is, actually, no, you still don't want it in the in-between place, which is really horrible, but you want to really move it as far away as you can, because what that does is it squares the car up. The car is turning, it starts a turning movement, and by the time it would be needing to brake and see a cyclist, they're now in front of them.
I get it.
Then their range, and you're not depending on peripheral vision or a blind spot. So that's really what this is you really want to try and get that car, turned around. It also, I mean, it's not a huge deal here, but it's better. It gets the car out of Eastwood, and it can actually wait for path users out of there. So less risk of getting rear-ended if somebody else is flying down Eastwood and not paying attention, and the person is actually yielding appropriately, they can get rear-ended. So it's got a lot of benefits. And, I think wherever, and you can see this again, the old railway was straight, right? And it's just because, again, the older kind of engineering thinking slid all of these up. But I think as we're able to redo them, generally, we should be kind of pulling them back and getting as much space as possible to make them safer.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments on this one, on Russell Street? Okay, did you have something else for us tonight, Chris?
Yes. So next, I'll introduce Aaron Canton as the new engineer with us, and has been working, little over a year now.
Almost a year and a half.
Yep. So Aaron's going to be talking about our Bikeways program, which consists of two different projects this year, one resurfacing and then one path extension project. And maybe we could talk about the path extension one first, the Demetral. So let me set this up a little bit. Years back, we were working on the Demetral path, I think with the PED Bike Committee at the time. And we got to a point where we did have an approved plan. It was a little bit controversial of how to get through the area between 3rd Street and 1st Street and the Demetral Park. And since that time, shortly after the project was approved, the law changed, which would not allow us to condemn for right-of-way for a new bike path. So that alignment kind of got shot down. And since that time, we've been working on the 3rd Street part, just kind of at a hand's length deal to try to buy the right of way from the landowner at the Quick Trip. We think we are getting close to being able to purchase that. Only time will tell until that easement is actually signed. But we're hopeful that we can get this piece in from Demetral to 3rd Street. And as part of that, we thought we'd take another look at how to get around just south of 3rd Street, and then some tidying up work at 1st Street that we left off of the East Johnson project. So Aaron's going to go ahead and discuss kind of what our current plan is. Originally, I had assumed for budget purposes we'd be able to afford this 3rd Street extension on this page, and then the 1st Street little extension that Aaron will show in a bit. But as Jim and Aaron and I were working on this, we were thinking, wouldn't it be great to get the rest of the project done too? And we're taking a look at that, and it's good. There's a possibility that we can afford this middle piece too. So we had Aaron draw this up, and want to get your guys' input on it. So I guess Aaron, you can take it away from there.
Thanks, Chris. Like you said, I'm Aaron Canton, City Engineering. I've been there a little over a year and a half, and first time at Transportation Commission. Looking forward to presenting these and future projects. So I can get right into it. The Demetral path extension to try and finish that bike connection from all the way from Yohara Bikeway to the Demetral Park, shown here. So this is what Chris mentioned, getting some easement from the Quick Trip owner right here to continue this path that goes all the way through Demetral Park, all the way to Commercial Ave. So a good ways. Continue it behind the Quick Trip. It's a 10-foot path here that will spill out onto 3rd Street. Kind of zigzags a bit to avoid this tree cluster here. Fortunately, it does go through a few trees here that are a little unavoidable given the tight space. And we're also including bumping the curb out a bit on 3rd. I can show you the next page a little closer. That path connection from the Demetral Park onto 3rd Street will continue staying in the right of way on 3rd all the way to Johnson. So here we're bumping the curb out about 6 feet. Keep a straight connection.
Could you zoom in a little bit? Could you zoom in a little bit for us? Thank you.
Is that all right? There we go.
Great, thank you.
So we've got a path crossing here at 3rd Street, which is a pretty low volume street. So even if a biker were to stay on the street, it would still stay pretty safe. So we're bumping the curb out here on the west side of 3rd, keeping a 10-foot path. So replacing this bit of sidewalk here, it's just typical 5-foot sidewalk, replacing it with a 10-foot path that will turn this corner at 3rd and Johnson. We'll have redo a ramp here that's pretty wide to allow for bikers and pedestrians to share that ramp, and also for bikers to spill out onto continuing onto 3rd or onto Johnson. And then redoing the sidewalk here along Johnson. This is the Tiny Homes property. We're doing a sidewalk here to 9 feet to try and keep a little bit more room in the terrace, so it's not right up against the road. And then redoing this ramp here at Johnson to continue on to the East Johnson bike path that was built, I think, back in 2013. So redoing this ramp here and also realigning it to stay pretty perpendicular to the street, kind of like what we had mentioned, so that they'll have some good visibility between cars and bicyclists, also widening that as well. So this will allow bicyclists to continue on to the existing Johnson Street path. And this is another little section that we're proposing, kind of the last little bit that needs to be improved. Some of this background aerial is out of date because the Johnson Street project that finished up last year has since improved this. Might be a little easier to see it here without the aerial. Basically, here is First and Johnson. We're just going to widen this existing narrow sidewalk between the 10-foot path and the existing 8-foot multi-use asphalt path, widen it, maintaining 10 feet and then narrowing to the existing 8 feet here. We're also proposing adding a concrete pad in the corner somewhere in this area for a bike maintenance station. Given that this is quite close to the future home of the public market, right in this corner. It's also worth noting that we're discussing with traffic engineering about a potential bus pullout, which would realign, keep the same idea of this bike path reconstruct, but it would realign it to allow for a bus pullout right here. Although I think it is unnecessary that a bus pullout is needed, but that's something we're still working with TE. And with that, I can turn it over to any questions regarding this. Start at the top here from the bike path, from the Demetral Park connection. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Grant, go ahead.
Thanks. As Chris mentioned, this was blast from the past from Ped Bike Motor Vehicle when I was on there. It's great to see it back on here, and fingers crossed I'm getting the Lambton Quick Trip on it. Two quick comments. One, just that intersection that you're showing in the park there, and Chris won't be surprised to hear this, but just the T intersection and then the new alignment, just make sure that movement from, like if you're going sort of eastbound towards the park, that you can make that left, that it's not such an acute angle. So just basically widen out that intersection a little bit so that it's more of a Y. Yep.
Right here.
Yep. Soften that so that it's not such an extreme current curve there. Then just jumping down to the 3rd Street crossing. It looks like it said 32 feet curb to curb there.
Yeah, with the proposed curb bump out.
Yeah, so I mean, I obviously, again, we wouldn't want parking there, so I would tighten that up as much as possible. So 24 feet or something, including the gutter pan, or and there might be limitations to what you can do with. You've got the driveway on the one side. That's part of it. But if you can move that bump out any larger, I guess on the east side of 3rd, you may be limited just by the other driveways, but if you could shrink that anymore, that crossing, that would be great. And then I know you probably don't want to.
Things, Grant, we were.
Go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
Because right now there's parking allowed on both sides, and 32 shrink. It's a pretty wide road. If we shrank it to 32, we thought we could allow people to still park on there if needed, and we thought that would be perhaps desirable for people of this area.
So like on the back half of the bump out, you're thinking?
I'm sorry?
Like, I mean, not the whole street width, but just where that proposed bump out is.
Oh, I gotcha. Bump that. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So good point. I see. So the driveway will limit us a bit, but we could look at making it a little bigger.
Yeah, I think it would be. I think that would be good. And then like I said, you probably don't want to even have to touch anything on the OM property, but it might. I mean, just talking with them, if you can just get that tiny little corner, like a foot or something, like if just to soften. Yeah, exactly, right there. Mm-hmm. It'd be, if they're amenable to it, and hopefully they would be. I mean, they're probably, unless it's probably just going to get tire tracks and turn into dirt pile anyway. So if they
I believe they have some wooden planters They've got kind of a
right up to the sidewalk
in there. Yeah, it kind of juts up right up the right of way.
Okay. And then I think the only other thing I had was down at the crossing of Johnson Street. Again, if there's any way to tighten that crossing up, and it might start to get outside of the scope of, kind of trying to make this happen in that same budget. But I think it's pretty wide there, because that's basically like one lane of westbound Johnson that kind of turns into 2 lanes, which is probably not even needed anyway when it hits, Pennsylvania Packers there. But if there were a way that you could, do a bump out there on either or both sides to keep that tight, and because that is where, westbound folks, as soon as it starts to widen out, there's just a risk of them accelerating. So anything to kind of tighten that crossing up there would be great. And I think when we looked at this originally, actually, there was some thought of even I guess for that whole section of OM. And again, maybe this gets into just out of scope with what you're trying to do. Maybe it's a future version, but you could probably bump the curb out there to the south along that whole block, because it's just way more space than is needed for the roadway. And that would also give you better turning radius around the corner for the path. So it might start to be more, doing curb work and that kind of stuff. But for term, I think there's just a lot of dead roadway right there that we could, have a wider terrace and give a little bit more space for that path to make the corner around Owen and tighten up the crossing.
We did look at that. We were trying to find something that we could afford with this project. There's that median there in Johnson Street, so we have to rip that median out, and then there is that extra length of the new curb, that whole length of the Occupy Madison parcel as well. So
yeah, I mean, take a look at it, and if nothing else, maybe put it, just put a sketch down for version 2 when this gets reconstructed, and then we could kind of, improve it at that point. But I mean, certainly good enough to move forward with it, and I think it's a really worthwhile project. So appreciate you looking at it.
Okay.
Harold, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, this looks all great. Just a very minor comment. You mentioned that concrete pad for a potential bike repair station. I think it might be worth checking in with the public market folks, because, if they could integrate it at their site, I think that would probably be preferable rather than having it, in the middle of nowhere. If they can integrate it, it could maybe have a roof over it, which helps with maintenance, because when these repair stations are exposed to the elements, the pumps don't last very long. So I think just checking in with them might be worthwhile. That's all I got. Thanks for this.
Sure, we can do that. Just a little background on the reason when we were trying to think what project that was, I guess it was East Johnson, and we were met with the neighborhood out here that's kind of in charge of that Penn Park. They actually requested this station. The neighborhood group did, so that's why we put it in there. But we can certainly talk to I know the program in there in the public market is pretty full. So my guess is if they don't have one, it probably wouldn't fit. But we'll talk to them.
Okay, yeah, I guess as you mentioned it, I guess the other option would be to talk to Occupy Madison. And I know, there's some grant programs out there where, maybe they can have it integrated in their site as well somehow. They might not have the space for it, but I guess that's also pretty nearby. So that might be another option.
Hey, any other comments? I don't see any hands raised. Chris, is that all you had this evening, or did you have another?
One more.
Okay.
Aaron's going to talk about just the Southwest path resurfacing.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yep. So kind of continuing surfacing of the Southwest path like last year, a few different segments and connector paths. So starting west to east on the belt line, resurfacing this whole stretch from the Beltline Bridge to Midvale, and including based on just some deteriorating pavement conditions, the connection on the south side of the belt line from the bridge to Hammersley Road, that pavement's in pretty poor condition. And then about 450 feet on the Hammersley Path offshoot on the southwest path, including those in the resurfacing, as well as a short segment of the Odana Golf Course path. Just seems like some higher use area there, possibly some stormwater reasons for some pavement deterioration. And here we're just typical full depth replacement of the pavement with a 2-foot gravel shoulder. Same resurfacing as last year's. We're also looking at the Midvale to Odana section, resurfacing all of that, and including connector path to Parman Terrace and Council Crest. And lastly, the section from Glenway to Commonwealth, resurfacing and including the Virginia Terrace connector path. This is the one that's raised with the retaining wall beside the path, and the short little stretch at the Sheldon Street connector. Additionally, with the resurfacing, a small segment of the Ponnack Park path. This is on the Lake Loop, so it is pretty high use. We went out there and it looked like it was crack sealed somewhat recently, so most of the path is actually in pretty good shape. We're proposing about 100 feet of typical mill and overlay, and then this sharp corner where you might know there is some nearby trees that has caused some roots to heave the pavement here. Overlay to just kind of raise the path and try and reconcile some of that root heaving to smooth it out. So just a small section of the Ponnack Park path. And with that, any questions or comments on the resurfacing?
Harold, go ahead.
Thank you. So let's start with the Ponnack Park path. As you said, that corner is pretty tight. There's the building going right up to the path, so visibility is a little bit limited. So seeing what you can do in terms of improving that so that people, when they cut just improving the safety there by people having better visibility and a nicer radius to trim. And I think that actually was widened a little bit already.
It's about 11 feet.
Yeah. So that definitely helped. If you can squeeze another foot in, why not? Southwest path, 2 comments. I think the comment that I always make when we talk about the Southwest path, thinking about squeezing any width out there, especially as we get farther in toward downtown. I mean, it is a heavily used path. Lots of people walking, lots of people biking. So, getting all the width that we can get. And I know that comes with problems and all that. The other comment, I know that Parks has started the public engagement process around the Madison Adventure Bicycling Trail System, or whatever that stands for. And I know that the Southwest Path is one of those projects that's in there. So thinking about whether there's any opportunity to engage that, and they might not be ready for that by next year, but thinking about that. Then the final thing about the Southwest Path, once we get to the Beltline, thinking about what's the detour plan for that? Because, I mean, with the previous repavings, it was pretty easy to get detours, but of course with the overpass, that is going to be more challenging.
First off, I can talk about widening. I know this area, especially being it's closer to the city from Glenway to Commonwealth. Widening is difficult given some of the pretty steep, actually quite steep slopes off the path in this area. So it would be very tricky to widen without including a railing or some sort of raised blockade between pedestrians. And that would obviously cost quite a lot more, I think, out of the means of this Bikeways program. But I do agree that is especially this area is quite commonly used. And regarding the traffic detour, especially at the Bell Line. Not sure, Chris, do you have any comments on potential detours there?
That's a good question. I think we'll have to work with Renee and see what our options are there. I haven't really thought about it yet, but certainly we'll include that work in the plan set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the critical piece is the actual overpass. So, if you can come up with a plan of keeping that closure as short as possible or not having to close it at all somehow, because once you're across, you have other options, but the overpass itself doesn't really have an alternative.
Yep.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, I'll be working pretty closely with Chris's staff to try to come up with how we can best accommodate that, knowing that particular piece, the bridge, is going to be a challenge.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. Chris, when you do these resurfacings or even new construction, the specifications for the asphalt lane, do you use safety edge as a specification, as a requirement? In other words, flatten that edge slope so that as aggregate wears away on the edge, that it's not a drop off? Are you familiar with safety edge?
I'm familiar with that. Safety edge. Is it?
It's an attachment they put on the paver to rather than just let the material slough off the back, that they actually try to compact the slope. And I think if you've never looked at that, I think you might want to investigate that.
Is that more expensive, Bill?
No.
Okay.
So you're still getting the top, the width, but it doesn't, rather than slough straight down or almost at a 90-degree angle. What is it? Is it going to be like a 2-inch overlay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can investigate the safety edge. If you have not looked at that, I suggest you do that.
So we do have the gravel shoulder.
Right. Yeah. And then after you put the gravel on, then, it still compacts. And what happens is, as some of that gravel may erode away, then you've got the asphalt at that slope. And so if a bike tire goes off, it's not like a complete drop off, and a bicyclist has an advantage to try to regain control.
You're having kind of a beveled edge of the pavement.
Yep, exactly. That's what the safety edge does, the purpose. It works very well for cars, but it'll also work for bikes too.
Sure.
Okay,
it's just
great.
a specification on the paving.
Sure.
All right, great comments. Any other thoughts? Thanks, Bill. Anything else?
No.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I assume that's all you had then, Chris?
Yep, that'll do it for this round.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, I hesitate to try and turn my video back on. I'm going to give it a shot. Can you hear me or not? Is that a yes?
Fine.
Okay, excellent. So on to item number 10, traffic calming subcommittee update. Bridget, Harold, Grant, and Bill are also members. So if any of them have anything to add, just let me know. At the last meeting on October 15th, we discussed and refined early draft concepts for the program and the timeline for the subcommittee's work. Big shout out to Bridget for agreeing to work on our subcommittee work plan, basically pulling the whole document together. So that was a huge effort. And so, and also fleshing out pieces of the work plan and the timeline that we hadn't accomplished yet. So big contribution on her part. And Tom Wilson, a shout out to him, who is also working on flowcharts, which I'm a very visual person. And with what we're talking about, flowcharts are going to be great to have. So, and our meeting on Thursday is canceled due to conflicts with some other meetings. So it'll be a couple weeks till we meet again. Anybody have anything else? And thanks to Patrick for the traffic calming subcommittee folder. That's great to have something in Legistar to be able to house all of our documents. Nothing else? Okay. Announcements from the chair. Hard to believe we only have 2 meetings left in 2020, one on November 18th and one on December 9th. We did have 5 Transportation Commission members attend the October 19th TPPB meeting. 2 of them also happened to be members of that group as well, and heard the budget discussions. We also heard a lot of other interesting topics such as BRT project and Vision Zero. So if you weren't able to attend, please consider watching the video recording. Very, very good discussion and excellent update. I also listened to the BRT project kickoff Zoom meeting on Thursday, the 22nd. Much of the presentation was a repeat of what we heard at the TPPB meeting on Monday, but there was a lot of good participation and a lot of good questions from the public. So I was happy to see that. We still have 3 vacancies on the commission, but I have heard that there is one potential candidate who is supposedly filling out the paperwork. So keep your fingers crossed. I had an opportunity to speak with this person, and I'd be really excited to have that addition to the commission. So again, if you know of anyone who would be interested, please direct them to the website so they can fill out the paperwork and contact Lila DaCosta in the mayor's office. And we can hopefully get back to having full members. Anybody else have any other announcements before we leave that topic? Okay, we do have a number of items on the agenda, both for the November meeting already, as well as the December meeting and future meetings. Patrick put together the potential items for the November meeting so that you can see those. And Grant gave me one for a future agenda topic related to RP3 permit fees. So you can either tell me now if you have any future agenda topics. You can email me. You can email Patrick. Does anybody have any other topics at this time? No? Okay, then I guess we need a motion to adjourn. And hey, I think we might have hit, about 2.5 hours. That's not bad. We have a motion to adjourn. Harold?
Move adjournment.
Is there a second? Oh, come on, somebody, second. There we go, Bill, second. All right. We have and Bridget too. She thirded. There we go. We have a motion and a second. I'm going to assume unanimous consent vote for adjournment, unless anybody raises their hand. Thanks so much, everybody. Great meeting. A lot of good feedback, particularly on the shared street. So thanks, everybody.
Bye.